Welcome to this retrospective slash review for Clive Barker's Undying. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just let the unedited last video that I made to let it run in the background. So there's a very good chance you may see multiple deaths in this one. It got worse towards the end than the beginning, but I'm sure you'll see at least one or two deaths in the opening part. But anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give you a quick rundown of my thoughts on the game, and basically we'll just go from there. So I want to start off by talking about some of the positive aspects of the game, or maybe less critical aspects of the game, as it were. So we'll start with the obvious, the graphics. So this game is fairly obviously dated. It's from 2001, and I'm not going to criticize its graphics like some people probably would. It's definitely a product of its time, and unlike other Unreal Engine games, the community behind it wasn't nearly as involved as they were in, say, like the original Unreal or Unreal Tournament, where you still have an active community putting out updates consistently and improving the game. You can't really say that about this particular Unreal Engine game. So I don't have anything negative truly to say about the graphics. In fact, for the most part, graphics are actually pretty decent. Yeah, they are a little blocky at times, which would be pretty par for the course in the late 90s, early 2000s, before things really started getting better for 3D gaming. So really, all things considered, not a bad looking game. There are some things like, for instance, you can just see the water here. The water looks kind of odd in the game in a lot of spots, but that's okay. For the most part, though, graphics are pretty decent. And I do want to mention the graphics from another perspective, though, and that was the fact that there is a mod for this game called Clive Barker's Undying Renewal, I believe is the name of the mod. And I did install it and give it a try initially. And not only does it modify the graphics of the game, gives you more widescreen options and things of that nature, but it also makes some gameplay changes that you can either enable or disable as you like. Having said that, it crashed on me pretty early on when I first started playing the game, so I really wasn't very far into the game at all before it crashed. And there probably may have been a conflict with some of the default files that were part of the game. I'm not honestly sure, but I was kind of a bit on a time crunch because I just wanted to play the game before Halloween had come and gone, basically. So I didn't want to sit here and truly dig into the weeds and figure out why that mod wasn't working. And it probably wasn't working because there was a glide wrapper packaged with the game right out of the box with GOG. Now, that obviously isn't something that came with the game originally in 2001, because they wanted you to play with an actual 3DFX Voodoo card. So it's definitely something that was added fairly recently. I don't know how recent, but basically the glide wrapper, for the most part, worked really good. The only time I think I truly had issues with the glide wrappers when I used a Vulkan backend, and at the beginning it ran really smoothly, but it ran too smoothly. So like the little cutscenes, they started talking over each other, kind of thing. So I think if you ran the glide wrapper with the Vulkan backend, it worked pretty much reliably, stably for the most part throughout the game. I did have one crash with the glide wrapper, and that was in the final boss fight, where I was trying to change the ammo of my shotgun. Coincidentally, since I had the shotgun up here, I was trying to change the ammo of my shotgun, and I was trying to attack the final boss, and that was the only crash that I actually ever experienced with the glide wrapper version of the game. So I do say that out of the box, the game is actually pretty stable And with the Glide Wrapper, you get pretty decent graphical performance for all things considered. Another aspect for me is that I played this game with Anti-Micro X running in the background. Now, I've mentioned in the past many times, for a lot of these older games, Anti-Micro X is a very good program to allow you to map keyboard and mouse controllers to a actual controller, so I can play on my TV and get a big screen picture, which for the most part worked. I mean, I played around a little bit with my controls, excuse me, and towards the end of the game, I was actually getting a lot better with how I had things mapped out. In particular, the selection of spells. I did a much better job with setting that up and getting used to swapping spells a little more quickly than I was initially. So I will definitely say that once you got used to it, truly the controls of the game can be customized to the point where it's actually not that bad, really. In fact, the controls are pretty decent once I, worked out my kinks. It just took me a little while to get those kinks worked out, to say the least. Now, I will say that one of the main issues I have with the game is early on, it can get very frustrating early on. That's honestly the best way I can describe it, basically, because the first enemy you come across are the howlers, and for an initial enemy in a game like this, the howlers are actually pretty difficult, to be completely honest with you. And I'm about to die now as I fall off the waterfall and die. So yes, the howlers as an initial enemy can be very difficult because their hitbox is very odd. Like, you have to be extremely accurate with the pistol, your starting weapon. Basically, you have to be very accurate to hit them, and it's just something that didn't really work very well initially. And even like later on, when I got the Scythe and whatnot, I could literally be standing right in front of one of those guys, and I'd swing the weapon and it wouldn't hit them. So as an initial enemy to the game, they're not really tough per se. It's just for some reason hitting them in the game, hit detection is it's off when you're dealing with howlers, for lack of a better word, basically. And I don't know, that just really contributed to a lot of the frustrating factor in the game. Just a lot of the opening levels of the game. So this is where it differs a lot from your standard first-person shooter, and the fact that your character is very weak. I mean, you cannot take hits almost at all initially in this game. I mean, you can get hit like 2-3 times, you're dead. And that happened to me quite a bit, definitely early on. So the very beginning portion of the game can be very frustrating, and I think it's really hard for someone to actually persevere through that opening portion and try and get through it. Having said that, one of the things about this game is once you get the shield spells, you see I have it up pretty much non-stop once I get it. Once you have the shield spell, the game almost becomes easy. It's like a night and day difference. And I will say I played on medium difficulty. There's only 3 difficulty levels in the game: easy, medium, and nightmare. And I played on medium. And to be fair, perhaps a lot of the issues that I had with the difficulty starting out, that probably could have been on me, because I was trying to conserve ammo, because ammo was pretty scarce to come by. Ammo and health packs. Early on, it's just really hard coming by health packs. Health packs in particular. Health packs are extremely rare starting off, and if you use them all up, it doesn't take anything to kill you, like I said before. So early on, the game is really difficult. It wasn't until I got to the portion where it sent you back in time to deal with the monks that I actually finally started to get plenty of health packs. So I wasn't really running low from that point on. So getting plenty of health packs there definitely started helping out. But once I got the shield spell, it was almost like a completely different game. I became nearly invincible. Further points to point fingers at myself is I saved a lot of my amplifier stones for when I would get something like the shield spell. Could I have beefed up some of my other magical spells? Definitely. Could I figured out the wheel to select magic more quickly? Absolutely. So part of my frustration definitely was me. So I'm not going to say it's all the game, because it's not for sure. But there is a good portion of it that is part of the game because of your fragility as a character. Um, and that's just basically the way it is. Um, like I said, after you get the shield spell, I was able to really start rushing through the game very quickly, and it wasn't until really that this level right here that I really started to get challenged. Even the boss fights were relatively easy for all the Covenant. I want to say children, but they weren't children. They were all grown up, basically. So the Covenant family, that's what we'll call them, the Covenant family. So most of the boss fights, I mean, I would say Elizabeth was fairly difficult. Once again, probably because of that early start, basically. But even her, I was able to get through her boss fight without, I think I only had to do it 2 or 3 times at most. So it wasn't too terrible either. Um, the final boss fight for this game, on the other hand, it was dastardly to say the least. So they definitely made up for a lot of the weak boss fights here in this particular level once you get to the Cthulhu-esque type creature. I mean, I don't know of any better way of describing it than some sort of Lovecraftian horror type monster, which does kind of make sense, this Clive Barker game. The fight with Aaron was very much something you feel like would probably be straight out of Hellraiser, with all the chains and hooks and things of that nature. So definitely has a bit of that signature for this director, basically. One of the things that I will say was kind of disappointing in the game was the music, or lack thereof. There just wasn't barely any music in the game. It was, when it did come on, it was fairly atmospheric and it was good, but it only lasted for a little while. And honestly, I'm not one of these people that needs a lot of music. But I mean, for most first-person shooters, having a good musical score is pretty important to me. It really is. About the only time I could think where a game that had a lack of a musical score that I didn't really mind would be Doom 3, which obviously came out many years after this one. But I don't know. I just feel like the lack of music hurt this game more than it did Doom 3. It was just empty. It just sounded very empty. And the level design, I mean, the way they got around a lot of the issues was they basically just locked the doors so that you couldn't backtrack and go the way you needed to go. So, I mean, I don't know if I was a big fan of that way of designing the mansion. Basically, so it's like you got this big open mansion, but you don't really. So it was just kind of weird. I mean, it kind of gave you the feel of an open world game without actually being open world at all. So there's that aspect also. But yeah, I mean, the lack of music was definitely, or the very scarcity of music, I should say, was kind of disappointing. It really was. Let's see, what else can I talk about with the game? Um, I don't know. I mean, story wise, it was it wasn't bad. It was pretty decent actually. Um, I, I kind of want to play it because I felt like it would be a good horror game, and I mean, it wasn't. I mean, I guess the horror aspect was there to a certain extent, but it's more just kind of an odd aspect rather than horror, I guess, in my opinion. Um, I mean, as far as a horror game's concerned, it's not bad. I mean, this is actually a good example of an area I think where they really skimped out on the graphics. Like the distant background looks like something from an oil painting or something, which is kind of a weird choice. Um, Not necessarily a bad choice, but it's definitely an interesting. I guess you could call it a stylistic decision, but it just in a way seems kind of cheap compared to other, you know, first person shooters or even Unreal Engine games of the time. So I think certain areas there are some graphical shortcuts that are definitely glaring, to say the least. Um, the mix of weaponry in the game, honestly, not too bad. I like the shotgun, obviously. The pistol, depending on the enemies you're using it against, the pistol actually could be a decent weapon, but early on it just wasn't very good. The Scythe was a pretty decent weapon, and I actually kind of enjoyed using the spear gun here. And that's just kind of my playstyle when it comes to first-person shooters. I try to use the weapon that the enemies are using, so I have a nice constant stream of ammo for it. I think that's just pretty much common sense when you're dealing with these types of games. Um, I felt like dynamite was kind of like a bit of a missed opportunity because it was part of the item menu and not really part of the weapons menu. So picking up dynamite wasn't really, I don't know, it wasn't very useful as a weapon, in my opinion. The ice cannon actually early on was really good. In fact, that was pretty much what I relied on for quite a while before I actually got good ammo in the game, really. So I would say as a starting weapon, and it had a better hit area, as it were. So I was able to hit the things like the howlers a little bit better with the ice weapon. In fact, the squid enemies, I'm not really sure what you would call them. They kind of look like mind flayers, only instead of walking around on feet, they were slithering around on like a slug type tail. So they actually were quite susceptible to the ice gun. So there were certain enemies that were weak to certain weapons, and so it definitely helped out with the different variety of weapons for sure. Spells, I mean, spells, not too bad. I mean, the one spell I think, I mean, Dispel is kind of like one of those. I don't really know if there's any reason to put any amplifier stones in it. But other than that, all the spells had uses, and I probably could have beefed up like the one that I used to destroy the skeletons. That one probably could have used a good, an amplifier stone or two. That might have not been a bad idea. Lightnings just didn't really seem to be too great of a choice when I got it, other than needing to open up certain areas of the game. Other than that, as you see here, the Skull Storm and the Shield, those are pretty much my bread and butter once I got them. And obviously, here and there, the Scry spell, but I wouldn't say it was, vital to the game as far as an offensive thing. It was pretty much just to advance the story. Other than that, I think the spells were pretty decent. And once you got that select wheel down, selecting spells more quickly became much easier to do for sure. So trying to think, is there anything else I can talk about with the game? No, I'd say the story was pretty decent. It wasn't bad. But I think the thing that holds this game back the most is the early difficulty, which really makes it hard to persevere through the opening portions of the game. And then to add to that, I would say that the final fight with that Lovecraft type enemy. That was just crazy ridiculous. That guy's got a spear through his head and he's still alive. Look at that. But yeah, the beginning of the game, very frustrating. The last level of the game here was actually pretty frustrating as well. So the beginning and end had a lot of frustration. But once you got the shield spell, that portion of the game actually did start to get quite a bit more manageable at that point for a little while. And it was allowed me to basically get through the story a lot more quickly. So I don't want to say this was a bad game because I don't think it was. And in fact, maybe if I had spent more time trying to figure out how to get that Undying renewal mod working, it may have actually been a better game to play. So I don't want to discourage anybody from trying the game. In fact, if you have time, it might be a good idea to give that mod a shot and see if it works. The only thing is, I believe that I don't know what it would take to get it working properly. That's really the gist of what I have to say as far as that's concerned. But out of the box, the glide wrapper works really well and reliably. So it's definitely something I think out of the box, most everybody should be able to play this game without too many issues. But I mean, keep in mind it is a little bit dated graphics wise. But if you're like me, that's probably not anything that is a deal breaker. As far as scores go, I'd probably give this one a bit of a lower score than I would some other the games I've played recently. And it pretty much boils down to the frustration factor and the just lack of musical score for the most part. I mean, a very scarce musical score, I should say. The game itself didn't have a lot of areas that required a guide. And the only reason why I had a guide was to give me some sort of idea about how to divvy up my playings of the game, like for video makings. That's really all I did was look at the headlines, and I didn't really look at what do I need to do here, here, and here. I could have, and I probably would have got a lot more, amplifier stones, and may have had a easier time of the game. But I didn't want to do that. That kind of takes away any challenge that the game has. And I really probably could have just flown up and got that Phoenix here without the fire. That was kind of silly of me. But anyway, from a score perspective, I'd say probably about a 75% is what I give it. I'm trying to think. Would I give it 75 or 80? Yeah, I'd say 75 because, I mean, that frustration level was just really, really high. And for quite a while, actually, the frustration, it took me several hours to get past a lot of the beginning portions of the game. And this level here was actually quite difficult as well. So, difficult's not bad. I do want to make that point. Difficult is not a bad thing, but when it's not fun as well, then, then it's not such a good thing either. So I don't think this game struck the right balance between difficulty and, fun factor. And that was what was missing, especially early on in the game, to say the least. Other than that, though, it's actually a pretty decent game. And if you're looking for a decent horror game, I don't know. It seems to be pretty decent, but I don't know if I would say it's really a scary game or anything like that. Maybe a little more freaky than anything. But I don't know. The horror aspects are kind of hit or miss, really, honestly. So, yeah, 75 I think seems to be about a fair ranking for it. It's not great, but it's not horrible either. It's just fairly average. That's my thoughts on the game. Anyway, I guess, like I said, that's my thoughts on the game. So, thank you very much for watching this video. I'll see y'all in the next one. Take care. And watch me drown in lava. It'll be fun.